Hey, welcome to another episode. Today we talk with John from ESI Money about his early retirement and how he got his family to millionaire status.
And don't forget the most important part of this entire story, obviously, is his purchase of Rockstar Finance. Rockstar Finance is an aggregate website that curates the best content in the personal finance community every day, sends it directly to your email, and it's an awesome site. So we're super stoked to talk to him.
Welcome to Fire Drill Podcast, where side hustles, savings, and creativity lead to financial independence. With your hosts, Gwen from Fiery Millennials and Jay from Millennial Boss.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Fire Drill Podcast. We're so excited to have John from ESI Money here. Welcome, John.
Hey, it's great to be here.
And my lovely co-host Gwen is here as always. What's up, Gwen?
Hello, everyone.
So John, let's have you kick it off by telling everyone a quick 30-second elevator pitch about your life.
Wow, about my whole life in 30 seconds. All right, let me tell you where I am now. My name's John. I live in Colorado Springs right now. I retired early in my early 50s. Before that, I was an executive my entire career working in marketing. We lived across the country doing that. I have a wife who I've been married to for 25 years and two children, a son who's 21 and a daughter who's 19.
So where does this fire journey start for you?
That is a great question. This is probably going to be unusual. When my wife and I were married, we decided we wanted to do something in our spare time together. I was a young executive then. I worked a lot of hours, didn't have a lot of free time. So the free time that we did have, we wanted to be sure that we were working together. So we spent a lot of time volunteering at our church in different capacities when we were single. And then once we got married, we decided we wanted to volunteer together. So there was a program way back in the day that was run by an organization that was real similar to what Dave Ramsey is now. So if everybody listening to this probably is familiar with Dave Ramsey now, but there was a precursor to him, and the guy's name was Larry Burkett. And he taught people how to counsel others. And we started doing that when we get married. We took the courses. We learned how to counsel people about finances because it was something we could do together. So it not only was something we could do together, it taught us the first day that we were married how to handle money. If you're familiar with Dave Ramsey's teaching, it's very similar. Avoid debt, save for the future, work on growing your income, invest, all the basics. So we had that from really the get-go of our marriage. And we saw, because we were counseling people in just terrible situations, we saw what not to do at the same time. So that's kind of where the financial journey started for us. And then, I got interested in it as we kept doing it, and I needed to help people. So I had to start reading, and books like The Millionaire Next Door were just coming out back at that time. And we kept growing and growing in our knowledge of finances because we needed to, because everybody we talked to had something different they were dealing with.
Regarding the Dave Ramsey thing,
yeah,
in the financial independence community, there's kind of a 50-50 take on the Dave Ramsey crowd. And I kind of love it because whatever gets more people into improving their lives and improving their finances, that's awesome. And I think he has a great plan, a good step-by-step process that most people can follow. And in some ways, it's more achievable than probably someone like Mr. Money Mustache, who may seem extreme for people. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think Dave is like step one. 70 to 90% of his time is spent on just getting people out of debt. So that gets them kind of to zero, gets them out of debt and ready to start. And then from there, they can build on that foundation by, reading books, by reading blogs and growing from there. So I don't agree with everything that Dave does. Like I use credit cards, for instance, and have for my whole life. And I make a pretty good cashback rebate every year doing that. But in general, he gets people from a bad situation to at least ground zero. And then from there, they can read the Mr. Money Mustaches and those sort of people and take their advice.
I really like Dave Ramsey because he gets people talking about finances in like a pretty low-key way. Like if you say, oh yeah, I'm taking a Dave Ramsey class, so church people are going to be like, oh, you freak. Why are you taking classes on personal finance? You're such a weirdo. But they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. Good for you. Like that's awesome. I also don't agree with several things he says. His numbers are wonky. Like his investment numbers are weird. And, he promotes people who charge fees and stuff like that. And then the whole credit card thing. So I think he is a great starter step as well.
Yeah.
So overall, though, Dave Ramsey, I feel like he's helped so many people. And it's great that you and your wife got into this together in a similar sort of fashion.
Yeah, so it really helped us. So from there, it was just everything was built upon top of that. We would see people, we would meet with them, we would learn from their situation, and that would happen over, weeks and months and years. Finally, I got interested in, like I said, so I started reading The Millionaire Next Door, and when The Automatic Millionaire came out, I read that, and read tons of personal finance books. Back then, magazines were a thing. You guys are probably like, what's a magazine? Yeah. But back then, people subscribed to magazines back then. So I had Kiplinger's, my Money magazine, Smart Money, read all those. It just kind of blossomed. And then to keep going, we found ourselves in Nashville, Tennessee, had a job there. And I started writing by accident, really. I had a trade publication. I was a vice president of marketing for a music company. And they asked me to write an article on how to sell more music. So I did. It was easy. Sent it in. And like a month or two later, they sent me a check for like $500. I was like, what? What is this for? So I contacted them back and said, hey, you guys sent me a check for something. And they said, yeah, it's for the article. We pay people to write for us. And I was like, wow, that was pretty awesome. I can write stuff and I get paid. So I started writing for them on a regular basis. And then from there, I found out that, there's this whole kind of freelance thing that was going on with magazines back then. And I kind of combined my personal finance interests and started sending query letters to magazines. And I started writing about personal finance. I did that for several years. I did it at night after the kids and my wife went to bed. And it was the main driver for us paying off our mortgage when we paid it off, because I could make $10,000 or $15,000 extra a year writing articles. And it just kind of grew from there. And then that eventually, 5 to 7 years down the road, became a blog that I started. And I started writing on the internet. So the personal finance journey just kind of grew, from those original classes, kind of just serendipitously through a series of events. And then obviously is applying those things in my life too. So my knowledge just kind of grew over the years.
So when you walked away from your job at 52, how did you determine that you had enough?
Yeah, so we've established, I think, that I'm a little older than you guys are. For my generation, if you retired, you're retiring at 65. And if you retired early, you might be retiring at 60. My mindset was, I'm going to retire early and I'm going to retire around 60 because that's what people my age do. And then in the midst of that, come along these people that are with a new line of thinking, like Mr. Money Mustache, and saying, no, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be like this. So it wasn't very long after I ran into him, which was probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago, somewhere in that range, where I was like, wow, I probably have enough right now to retire. And I did. Going back, I haven't written a post on this yet, but I probably will at some time. Where was I financially independent? It was probably in my early 40s, because we never really spent that much. And we had a large amount of assets, by the time we were in our early 40s. But it was just that change of thinking and said, okay, there's a new way of doing it. I should think about that and realize, okay, I can retire now if I want to. I was in a job that I didn't want to retire from, and I was in a city I didn't want to retire in. So I kept working. And then eventually we ended up in Colorado, and I was like, this place is awesome. This would be a great place to retire because I wouldn't have to go anywhere or do anything because I could just do stuff here. And that's really what ultimately got me to the point of taking the leap. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so you do share your net worth, right?
I don't share it in detail. I did a guest post where I revealed that I had at least $3 million in assets when I retired. So that's public knowledge.
Okay, so that just gives people a benchmark of sort of what you were looking at. And I know from personal experience that where you live in Colorado is actually a relatively lower cost of living place. So what are you doing with the rest of your money?
Well, it's funny. I was talking to somebody about that today. So we aren't living on our assets at all. We have our assets set up so they churn off enough income that we just live on the income of the assets. So we have to decide what we're going to do with them. Are we going to give them away in our lifetime? Are we going to give part of them to our kids? Are we going to, we don't know. We're in the process of working through our estate plans right now. And that's something that we haven't come to resolution on. So I don't have a really good answer for that right now.
Why did you continue to work until a later point instead of cutting it off earlier if you have a surplus?
I can't explain it other than it was the mind shift. I just didn't think that it was possible for whatever reason. Even though I had more than enough, I never really sat down and thought about it because early retirement was 60 for me. I never, until someone said, no, no, that's not, think about it this way. The shockingly simple math, think about it. And you're like, yeah, that's right. And so it wasn't in my thinking, I guess. So I was blind to, the option, even though, and for some reason I'd set an arbitrary number many, many years before that. I mean, the 4% rule wasn't even around then. So, Eisenhower wasn't president when I was born or anything like that. But, when I mentioned that when I worked in DC as an intern during my college years, Reagan was president, my kids are like, holy cow, was that like back in the 30s or something? Did they have cars? Did they have this or that? So, it was a long time ago. So all those rules and things that we take for granted now did not exist. So really for me, it was a mindset thing more than anything else. And I'd set an arbitrary number of, I think I need about $4 million. I could pluck that number out of the air. And I wasn't there yet. So then it wasn't time to retire.
The reason I'm asking is that I'm curious if you were going to say it's because you wanted to achieve certain things in your career, but you didn't really say that.
No.
I know from your story, you've achieved a lot. I mean, you were an executive, you've had a lot of success professionally. I'm just wondering if you're looking back and thinking that it was worth it.
Yeah, so that is a great question. So it's kind of like, would you do it the same way that you did it? I think overall my career was worth it. I wouldn't say I loved my job and my career, but I would say I liked it. And I would say my second to the last job I had, I got to be the president of a company, which that was kind of one of the things I really wanted to do, just to see what it was like. And wow, I learned a lot in those 2 years. So I don't think I regret that time, but I think if I had to do it over again and knowing what I know now, I would have retired much, much earlier than I did.
So you retired as a millionaire, and now on your blog, you cover millionaire stories. So talk to us about how that started, because I absolutely love that feature.
Yeah, people do like that. So I'm a big proponent in learning from, people that have done it already. So that's one of my things about my blog that I focus on is, hey, I've done this and I can teach you how to do it as well. But I'm not the only one out there that's done it, obviously. So a lot of other people have. I started with friends that met online say, hey, I'd be willing to be interviewed and I have this sort of net worth. And I'm like, wow, that would probably be kind of interesting to people hear stories about other people with high net worth. So it just started with a handful of people. And then once the series started, people started volunteering like crazy. So I have 35 or so published now, and I have a waiting list of 40 people or so that have volunteered and are waiting to take their turn to tell their story. So it's been great. It's been awesome to hear the stories and how different they are, but how they still achieved, financial success in different ways. People from all over the country, all over the world, of different backgrounds. It's been inspiring for that reason. I think that's why people like them, Gwen, is because they're real people who did it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, hey, that guy did it. And that story sounds a lot like mine.
Yeah, right.
So maybe I'm just in my chapter 2 compared to his chapter 10.
That's right. You guys, both of you are so much further ahead than I was at your age. It's just like night and day. So you guys are on the right path for sure.
That definitely feels good. It's tough in this community because you compare yourself to other people your age who, even though we are doing exceptionally well, you look around and you're like, oh my God, this person's doing 5 times better than me.
They retired at 23. What are you guys doing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Although, age is nothing but a number. It doesn't really matter, in my opinion.
Yes, and
you guys say that, but
you have so much time. You're so much further ahead of the game. You're going to enjoy your lives. You're going to live them fully. You're going to have a lot of free time to travel. You're going to live a life that is very different than what generations past have done, and probably a life different than most people your age are going to live, to be quite honest. But it's going to be awesome just because of where you are now and the things you're doing and how educated you are and the steps you're taking at the ages you are. Most people aren't taking those steps when they're in their 50s. So you guys are just way, way ahead of the group.
Well, you flatter us. So speaking of this type of conversation, I know you have kids and they are reaching young adult stage. So what are you telling them? Like, would you tell them to do what you did, or are you giving them different advice?
Kids are awesome. And a lot of times they listen and a lot of times they don't. So you tell them the advice that you think that they need, that they'll take and they can run with, that'll do them the best, and every child is different. And you share that with them, and then they choose their life. They have to live their life. So they decide whether, what part of what you told them they'll go with and what part they won't go with. So, we've taught the kids all along about managing your money. Here's some for spending, here's some for saving, here's some for giving, and the basic principles. And then as they get older, then, they're trusted with more. We're challenging them more. We're introducing new concepts. And, that works all the way up until, they're still in college and getting ready to move out of the house. You're still giving them advice. And as they get older, they decide more and more about what they're going to listen to and what they're not going to listen to.
Some of the pieces of advice that you talk about on your blog, when you look back at your own story, you said you wish you worked my career sooner and harder. And you gave a stat that you were able to grow your salary by 8% every year, but you think you could have mastered more. If you were kind of giving your advice to one of your kids in their early in career phase, what could they do to actually get more money?
So that gets down to the question of, is that what they want to do? Do they want to earn more money? Do you want me to answer what my kids want to do? Or do you want me to answer the question, if someone who's younger wants to earn more money, what would I tell them to do?
I guess it's philosophical. I mean, if there's someone who has a passion job, then they should probably pursue that and just make sure that they can live comfortably. But if you're someone who wants to optimize, then you should do that.
Right. So my daughter, for instance, is going to college now. She's a junior, and she wants to work for the federal government in some sort of, anti-terrorist sort of capacity. So we'll see how that pans out, first of all. But she's not going to make a fortune doing that, right? But she thinks that she'll enjoy it. So she's listened to what I've had to say. We talked about possible careers. We talked about, here's what you could do, and this is the sort of lifestyle you could have monetarily, or here's what you could do, and here's what sort of lifestyle you have monetarily. And we could look through the options. We talked through it. She made a decision. So now I'm helping her fulfill that goal by teaching her basics that I know: how to interview, how to write a resume, how to network, how to put yourself out there in a professional manner so that you stand out among the crowd. So I'm using my skills, and she's taken that advice and she's done really well with it. Now, if somebody else was saying like, hey, I just want to make a good amount of money, I would say, first of all, you want to pick a job field that earns traditionally higher salary. So, IT, engineering, business, law, those sort of things, those professional sort of careers earn, more money on average. So first of all, you start just by being in that industry, making more. Then you need to work at your career. You need to manage it proactively. And Jay, this is what I didn't do well because I had to figure this out on my own. Nobody was telling me this in advance. I kind of had to pick it up along the way. But if I had known what to do, I would have, sat down with my boss on day one and said, what's a good performance look like here? And then I would have worked to have done better than that. And I would have pushed harder for promotions based on my performance. I would have spent more time networking within the company. I would have spent more time caring about how I interact with my coworkers, because being likable is almost as important as performing in a job.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So I would have done all those things. And that's why I would counsel someone to do today is, there are steps at each one of those points that you can take to overperform, to be likable, to network, and keep learning and developing yourself, outside of work, because people that do that are able to perform better, and then they get promoted and they make more money. So those are all the sorts of things that I would do myself and that I would counsel someone looking to make a lot of money in a short period of time to do as well.
100% agree on the likability factor too. A lot of people hearing that advice are probably saying, I don't like playing the political game. I just want to be myself. And I kind of see it as, well, you have a choice. You can go out of your way to make connections that will be valuable and have a return for you, or you cannot because you oppose it ethically. And one of them will give you more money, and one of them you can hope it will give you more money. Why don't you go for the sure thing?
Right. Yes. You don't have to change from one person to another. We all have choices, small little choices, like just be nice. That's a key part of it. Just be nice and think about the other person. It doesn't take a lot of time or effort to do that, to have someone really like you.
Yeah. So for instance, going above and beyond, we had to call a contractor in today at the last possible second. They had tons of things going on, but we had a very pressing need that was the highest priority in the entire company. And so we had to get him in there. And, he arrives, he's grumpy. It's Monday morning at 8 a.m. He's having the worst day. He worked all weekend long, and this project is not going well. And here we are calling him away from that project and doing something else. So, I made sure to express how grateful we were and how thankful that we were, and, flatter him up like, oh,
Yes.
nobody else in the company could have done this. Like, you're the best. And then because I know that he likes it, I was like, all right, I'm getting you some kombucha. And he's like, yes. And you know what? Getting him a couple of bottles of kombucha is going to set me back like $15. But that goodwill that I'm building with him and my team is building with him, hopefully will go a lot further than that $15 would have.
Yes, it definitely will. Well, Gwen, everybody loves you anyway, right? So you don't really have to try to be likable.
No, that is just what Gwen is good at. She's so good at that.
Right.
I definitely don't. And now that I'm leaving my job, everybody has told me, they're like, we're going to miss having you around because we really like it. And so that's the part that makes me sad is my sociability skills will not be exercised every day in an office environment. But
You'll be talking to people at coffee shops or
That's
whatever you
right,
do.
Yes.
yeah, I can't stop talking to people. It's not a problem, but it's definitely a thing.
For me, it doesn't come as naturally. I mean, I'm definitely on the friendlier side, but compared to Gwen, it's just not even the same thing. So I've tried to make myself more of a woo girl. I wrote a post on my site about that. But it's just, how do you be more friendly and open to people, and how do you communicate that you're open? So for me, it means I need to invite people out like, oh, let's get coffee or let's get lunch or do these things that personally, I probably just want to sit at my desk and get my job done or listen to a podcast by myself. But I know it's important. And then when I actually do them, I like them. I'm like, oh, wait, I actually enjoyed doing this. I should do it more often.
Right. That was me too. So I'm naturally like that as well. And I didn't a lot of times early on in my career, I would just have lunch at my desk because I could read a book or do whatever I wanted to do at that point. So I would do that differently as well. I do more, Jay, what you're talking about. And I did that later in my career. And you're right. You find people are awesome, right? You find new things about them. You enjoy their company when you're out at lunch or whatever. And then you have a camaraderie when you get back to work.
Yep. So quickly, let's touch on rental properties. I know that you have some, and that's been part of your story. Has it been a significant chunk of your net worth? Tell us about it.
So it's not a significant chunk of my net worth, but it's a significant chunk of my retirement income. In 2012 or so, my son was on a basketball team, and one of the parents of another one of the boys was a real estate agent who also had rental properties. And I invited him to lunch, kind of like we were just talking about, and said, hey, I'd like to be able to get into real estate because I wanted to turn some of my assets into more income producing assets. I was thinking about retirement already at that point. I said, can you teach me how to do it? He's like, I absolutely can teach you how to do it. I'll teach you everything. And that's what he did. He taught me the ins and outs of real estate. We were in Grand Rapids, Michigan at the time. And my deal with him was I would buy all my properties using him as my agent. So he always made a commission whenever I bought something. So during the next 2 years, we bought 3 properties with a total of 5 buildings on the properties with a total of 14 different rental units. So some of them are buildings, some of them are multi-unit buildings. And we spent $600,000 doing that, which you can do that in Grand Rapids, Michigan, right? You can't buy one place like that probably in San Francisco, but in Grand Rapids, Michigan, you definitely can, especially after the years we were doing it were the years right after the whole real estate market had been crushed. So people were looking to sell, and they're looking to sell at attractive prices. So we spent $600,000, and I make about $60,000 a year off those properties in income after the expenses. So it's not a big part of not even a third of my net worth, but it's $60,000 a year. I mean, I could live on $60,000. I wanted to dial back my lifestyle a little bit. It'd be pretty easy to do that.
I really like how that worked out for you. Like, it's not your overall real estate holdings aren't a huge chunk of your net worth, but they're some of the highest producing, and that's what you live off of. Like that, that's what I want.
Yeah, I bought at a good time in a good market, so that helped. I had a great teacher. I made mistakes along the way. For instance, for whatever reason, I get fixated on numbers. We talked about how I set 4 million as my retirement number. So I was fixated on 10%. I want to earn a 10% return on these properties, or I'm not going to buy them. So I could have, if I would have just loosened that up a little bit to like 9.8%, which is a great return still, right? I would probably have twice as much of money in rental units, and they would be earning twice as much for me. And it still would be roughly a third of my net worth now, but we'd be earning, way more. But I was just kind of fixated on, no, I want to earn 10%. That's my goal. I'm going to stick with it. So that's what we did with the ones that we bought. You, Gwen, I know you're kind of taking a similar path, and you're at an age where I just finished the book, Building Wealth One House at a Time, or I think it's something like that. And the guy talks about there, if you buy one house a year, and he has a formula in the back with a little table, buy one house a year for 10 years, this is how you're a millionaire after those 10 years. And he takes you through the whole thing. And you're working on that path, from what I understand, right now. I would probably do the same thing if I were you.
I am definitely trying. So my entire life has been spent in customer service roles. While, I bought a house and I live for free, I'm having a really tough time with the management part of this. It absolutely crushes me to have to kick people out and everything. And I'm just a people person. I'm not a business person. So to have to think about myself first and put myself first is really difficult and a stretch for me. For instance, the new tenant that I put in, he's going to get kicked out at the end of the month. And I've tried to help him. I've done everything I can. And he just can't help himself. So I need to kick him out and get a better tenant in there that's going to pay me rent. I'm going to kick him out, and then I'm going to go home and cry because I feel really bad, and he's going to be homeless. But it's not my fault. It's his fault. And I need to remember that this is a choice that he decided for himself.
Yes. There are hard parts to real estate. I have never managed my own properties. I found a property manager that I like, and good thing, because now I live in Colorado and my properties are in Michigan. So it'd be kind of hard for me to manage them from here. So I've never had to do that. I have a pit bull property manager that takes care of that. But that would be hard for me too. It's hard, even if the person is just an idiot, even if they destroy the place, which I've had tenants do that. You still feel bad. You feel bad that, this person, you're kicking them out of a home and they have to go somewhere else. But people do crazy things. And like you said, it's their choice. They've made those decisions and they now need to live with the consequences. And if they want to take bad attitudes and habits somewhere, they can take them somewhere else.
Yeah, so I actually didn't buy a property recently, and I'm weirdly happy about it because the property price would have been $79,000, but I would have had to put at least $40,000 in the next 2 years. And that's just an insane amount of money to somebody who's just starting out freelancing. Yeah. So I decided to pass on that property, and I'm so glad I did. That was my goal at the beginning too, buy one property a year and go from there. But with this shift to freelancing, I don't know how that's going to work out.
Yeah, the hourglass isn't running out or anything on you. Still got a lot of time.
So before we get into the final two, I have one last question. And we've thrown a couple softballs. It wouldn't be an interesting podcast if we didn't do a hardball.
Okay, now here we go.
Okay, so you have recently acquired and purchased Rockstar Finance, which is this awesome website that is a curation of all of the best posts that are out there in the personal finance community, which means now you have a responsibility on that curation. And I want to start by reading you a comment that we got on our podcast. And I'm curious to hear, how are you thinking about these things on Rockstar? So this is what the comment was. It was on our iTunes review, which, by the way, thank you for leaving us these reviews. It was helpful. Okay. They said, it would be nice to hear from bloggers who don't work in STEM fields, who offer a diverse perspective, or who are non-white males. The whole FI community tends to get flack for this, and I think this podcast would be a great way to break down those barriers. And I have to admit, when I first read it, I was really bummed about it, because this is something that Gwen and I think about every single week. We keep stats on it. We have a shared iCloud note where we write down diversity stats on guests that we bring on, and then we report on them to each other. For example, we made sure that in the first 50 episodes, 50% of our guests were female. And that's kind of important and huge in the community. So I kind of was thinking, oh, we're doing really well. And then to get that, we were like, okay, actually, we're not doing that well. We're doing better, but we're not there yet. And I think that's really important. And it's something that we are actively trying to do. So we're making an effort, keeping stats, doing that. How do you feel about that in terms of Rockstar? Is that something that you're thinking about?
There's a long answer to that, and there's a short answer. So I'll try to keep it short. So you guys know that J Money owned the site before I did. And when he and I were transferring it from, first of all, we were discussing about the purchase, and then we were actually afterwards, he was, transferring and saying, here's how I do this, here's how I do that. He took me through everything. He really beat into me that we want the best content at Rockstar Finance. That's what we're about. We're about finding the best. And I'll say now, that is one of the most subjective statements in the world, is what is the best content. And it's like saying, well, what's the best movie? What's the best song? What's the best piece of art? It's very subjective, right? We have general parameters. So we've written an article called, how to write rockstar content. But even when we had Jay, me, and Kate, who was curating for a while, we had a couple weeks where we were all picking articles, and we were all trying to pick the best, the way we saw them. There were maybe 20% of the articles that overlapped. It's very subjective. We all had different points of view on what was the best, right? Because even though we were trying to go by the same standard, that's what he beat into me. And that's what my attempt is for Rockstar Finance, is to find the best and to share the best. And if the best is written by all women, then it's going to be all women. And if it's written by all men, it will be all men. And if it's written by all people of a certain color, that's what it will be. It will be the best content that's out there.
So are you keeping stats? How do you know if it's all women or?
I don't discriminate in any way. So I pick the best content. So I read it, and a lot of times you can't tell. I mean, sometimes you can tell and sometimes you can't tell. And then, as I get more familiar sites, I know if it's, a man or a woman writing, so I'm just familiar with it. But it doesn't matter to me who it is. Is the content good? Do the readers want to read this? Is this the best content that I can find for them today?
The reason that I'm asking this is because if you asked Gwen and I how we were doing, for example, the fact that we only had 50% female guests on the podcast, that actually shocked me. I thought it would be like 70%. I thought we were doing better than that. And particularly when I looked at what percentage of guests were from persons of color, I was shocked by the number. And it means that we need to do better. So I'm just curious if that's something that you guys are thinking about and if you're considering it. Because sometimes I think our biases and our who we know and our network could be into play. Another thing we looked at was who was pitching us. And I did stats of, okay, for men and female at least, what percentage of people were males and females that pitched us. And actually, it turned out to be relatively even. I had a hypothesis that less females pitched us, but that's not necessarily true. But from a person of color standpoint, it was definitely true. So maybe I need to be more proactive in that case. So I'm just curious if that's something that, you guys are thinking about. And it would be great if you did think about it.
So the other thing is, I'm about 2 months into curation. That's how much experience I have doing. I took over roughly at the end of December. We're still figuring out, what it looks like. But the underlying principle is we owe our readers the best content. We don't discriminate for or against anybody. We discriminate on the basis of, is the content good? And we have those parameters that we try to judge by, does it meet those criteria or does it not? And then, like I said, that's subjective.
Right. No, and I know we on the podcast, we're doing the same thing. We're not bringing a guest on who's not truly an expert, but if there's a way that we can have an expert that also helps us, maybe from a diverse background, then that only helps us because we want more people to be moved by this movement and we want more people to improve their finances. So we need to have a diverse set of people on the podcast sharing their stories to inspire more people. So that's kind of a personal mission of mine. And we will close this segment of the podcast down because we need to wrap it up. But thank you for hearing me out with this. And that would be great if that's something Rockstar at least is thinking about.
Well, we're certainly thinking about it now. But ultimately, we want to find the best content. That's our number one mission, is finding it wherever it is. We look at 1,500 posts a week to do that. Like I said, probably what you would pick is different than what I would pick and is different than what Gwen would pick and different than what a lot of people would pick. But hopefully we get it right more often than we get it wrong.
Okay, great. All right, final two. Gwen.
Okay, so how can people get in touch with you?
2 main ways. Well, actually, I guess 3 now. So I have esimoney.com and then Rockstar Finance. Both of those are sites that I hang out with on a regular basis. My preferred method of social media is Twitter. So I'm at ESI Money on Twitter. and I'm there every day almost, and sharing. I use that as an extension of Rockstar Finance. I share articles, even as I'm looking at them, and I'm not picking them because I don't think they're right for Rockstar. There's this whole subset that I share to over 10,000 followers. And, I share probably 20 or 30 a day.
Awesome. All right. Jay, you want to do the final one?
John, what is your wildest dream?
Wow. My wildest, am I limited by anything? Like,
you are limited by your imagination.
Yeah, people say crazy things, so give it to us.
Oh, I want to be Batman then. That's my wildest dream. Yeah, if I could do anything, and I would love
Say the Batman voice. You don't have a Batman?
I don't have a Batman voice, no, but I'm
Batman
awesome. I'm awesome. I'm on at Arkham Asylum and all those video games. I love Batman.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. We learned a lot, and we can't wait to see what Rockstar does this year.
Well, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Go to our website, firedrillpodcast.com, to continue the discussion and get the link to our private Facebook group.
If you like us, leave us a review on iTunes. If you're like me, you have no idea how to do that. So, in the podcast app or in iTunes, search for Fire Drill Podcast, find it, click the Reviews tab, and write something to make my mother proud of me. We read every single review and want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for making this podcast possible.